Okay, so ways that people can overcome their addiction, because again, I'm not trained as a peer counselor or whatever, but I'm talking to people and their families a lot now, especially on Fridays. So if you have made it through detox, which is that week of the cravings and all the bad side effects, and you've gotten essentially the drug out of your system, which is really heroin. Some of the drugs take a few more weeks, but let's imagine you made it through the detox part. Now the most critical thing is you have to have what's called a sober support network. Even though the drugs are gone, the craving and the desire for the drugs remain. So that means you got to be part of the AA or NA or Nar-Anon or some group, and the families have to have a buy-in. The families have to help you. If you've gotten crimes that have been committed along with your drug use, you've got to work with either, drug court or whatever and try to get those mitigated somehow. But then you've got to have what's called that sober support network. And that means this is going to go on for the rest of your life. It isn't just for 6 months. Because what happens a lot of times are people think, oh, I'm okay. I've made it through a year. I'm clean and sober. I don't have to go to group anymore. And then you start getting back with your old, friends and back with your old acquaintances and your old the people that you were with. So, and that's going to happen because how can you isolate yourself from the people that you were with ahead of time? So everybody, and I don't say everybody, but there's a lot of relapsing. And so people have said, what is the success rate? People always want to say that. What is the success rate? It's really hard to measure. But the ones that have had really good long-term success are not the 1 week or 1 month or even a couple month program. There are these very, very lengthy programs like Teen Challenge, which is really called Adult Teen Challenge. It's a year, and it's like a Jesus Christ-based thing on a farm. So they're basically wiping. It's called like Control-Alt-Delete. You're doing a reset here. You are changing all your behaviors. You're changing your work ethic. You're changing everything, and you're kind of cleaning out the system. And that has like a 70% success rate. But your normal thing of 28-day, detox and rehab, you're back to the same thing. Yeah. And you've got, and there's all these things that have happened. There's a lot of PTSD and there's a lot of trauma, and that's not dealt with. Okay, things that aren't working. So they're trying to change things up, because you hear all these statements all the time. We can't arrest our way out of it, which means just arresting people and putting them in jail doesn't work. So they've realized that. You can't arrest our way out of it. And now I'm hearing more like, well, we can't rehab our way out of it. Meaning we're putting $100 billion or so into rehab, and people are spending $20,000 a month, or the insurances are, for that 1 month little stint. I think Passage is Malibu. You see that late on TV. I heard that's like $70,000. So it's a lot of money, but then all it is sometimes a little vacation, and then you go back to the same thing. So I think when they say what doesn't work is we can't rehab our way and we can't arrest our way. So what does that leave? That leaves prevention. Now prevention is the cheapest thing, because prevention is stopping first use. Because for a certain percentage of the people, once you get that opiate or something in your system, they're going to become addicted. So how do you stop first use? That's with prevention. It's not being done, hardly at all. And I'm not talking 1980s Nancy Reagan, brain on drugs, all the scrambled egg. And I'm not talking DARE, because DARE is, I call it scare, DARE scare. I mean, not that it doesn't work at some level, but I hear not really. So if you want to see how prevention might work, watch the 3-minute, 40-second Hey Charlie, Stop the Spiral video. If you watch that, and in my opinion, every high school kid should be mandated to watch that video, which is basically a kid that has it all, that just makes some bad decisions, first time use at a party, and then dies. It is the best video that should be watched by everybody and then discussed. And that basically says, my prevention message is going to be, you are going to be in a situation where you're in a bad mood, things aren't going great, or guess what, maybe they are even going great. Maybe you just won the championship, and now you're going to let loose for the weekend, and you're going to be in a situation where somebody says, man, here's some powder, you're going to feel like $100, snort this stuff. And you have to say, Oh no. Based on what happened in the Hey Charlie. That has to be cemented in people. And that, I'm not going to say the scare thing, because people say, it's not going to happen to me. And that's the belief when you're young. It's not going to happen to me. But I talk to people who have dead 20-year-old kids on their hands, and it does happen. They still say it's not going to happen to me. But if they know you're going to be in these situations, no, I'm walking away. I'm walking away because of what could happen. So I guess what doesn't work is we got to get better at prevention education. We got to get it in the schools. We have to couple the prevention education intimately with mental health and suicide. It all has to be one big behavioral health discussion, and it's not being kind of done. And everyone's busy, but here's what doesn't work, because I've done some I call it Stress Night Out. It's an hour-and-a-half thing. It's really pretty cool. It's all that stuff I talk about, purpose, worry, we figure out the worries. So we get these worry surveys. I got hundreds of them now, and they're anonymous. And I say to the kids, and some of the parents are there, do you want to show your parents this? Do you want to tell your parents what you're worried about? Because some of these kids are worried to the max. And you know what they say? No, I can't talk to the parents. And then you talk to the parents, and the parents don't have much of a buy-in. They don't go to the meeting. They don't go to the big meeting. They go, you know what, we're really busy. We give the kids everything they need. And I had a tough life growing up, and they got it pretty easy. So they should kind of get with the program. They're not understanding the stress and the worry and the perfectionism and the Instagram and all that crap. They are not getting it. So the kids are going to all slip through the cracks. So what doesn't work? The disconnection between the parents and everything that's getting their kids. That is absolutely has to change. So I said, I'm willing to talk to any PTA group. I have all this stuff all done. I have all the PowerPoints. I've been doing them. It's like you need to have a buy-in, like Gene Twang said in iGen. Unless you realize what's happening and start acting on it early, we're going to have a lost generation, which we're losing now. The total tip-up, the tip-up is 2012. The suicide rates have been slowly going up, but the big accelerated tip-up, especially females 10 to 14 and 15 to 19, is 2012. Yeah. And now it's skyrocketing. Now, has it caught up to the boys? No, because the boys are leading at a death rate of 3 to 1. Right. But the rate increase is females. Right. And that's because of perfection, Instagram, and the idea that I can't be as good as I really should be. And when they asked the focus group, and I can get you this stat because I have the graph. I have it under my suicide folder. I just didn't bring it tonight. When they asked, the focus group was 10 to 14-year-old girls based on Gene Twang. They brought them into Good Morning America. And they said, what is really causing all these issues with adolescent females? And they said, here's what we feel. Now, she said the same thing that they said, and they hadn't read the book. They said, if we don't get a good grade, if we don't get a good test score, we won't get a good grade. If we don't get a good grade, we'll have a bad GPA. We won't get into a good college, then we won't get a good job, and we will die alone in our parents' basements. Now, when parents hear that, they're shocked out of their mind that the kids have already planned out this awful, awful life, but it's all based on this perception that I'm not perfect, but I should be perfect. I should have, the top scores. I should have A's in everything. I should be the prom queen. It all should be, but it's not reasonable. Now the schools are saying maybe we're going to have to dumb down the grades. Maybe we're putting too much stress on them. That's not the issue. The issue is after 2 hours a day of social media, there's just so much time to do stuff. And if you have FOMO, if you're staring at your phone and all this stuff is going on and you go over 2 hours a day, like I told the kids when we did Victor, and I said, listen, I'm not telling you not to use your phone. I'm saying that there are only so many hours in the day. And if you are killing 8 to 10 hours on your phone, you can't get your tasks done. So when you do your worry survey, and I have the worry surveys, and I sort it, and I said, what are the top 5 worries? I'll tell you right now what they are. The top 5 worries are, I have too much to do. I can't get everything done. How good are my grades? How much college costs, and will I get a good job when I grow up? Those are the top 5 high school worries. Now, are the girls worried more than the boys? Yes, if you break it down, they are. Girls are worried more about how we treat the environment, countries fighting with each other, even their brothers and sisters. Boys don't give a crap about their brothers and sisters, at least it doesn't worry them. But all the main worries, those top 3 worries of getting good grades, too much to do and not getting things done, are directly related to cell phone use. And so if you don't reduce that, their suicide and the mental health and all that anxiety, stress is going to continue. And you can't expect the schools to say, well, now you don't have to turn in homework anymore because I'm worried that you might kill yourself, because they are worried about that. Schools are worried about that. But they have to have a level of performance. But they can't achieve that performance because of the smart media and the phones. From just talking to parents who have boys and girls, this goes back to, I think, just the differences. I mean, like the boys in the sandbox, they'll smack each other around and then they'll be friends. Meanwhile, the girls are plotting to how to get the other one and what rumor they can start. So there's a lot more of that socialization. How that carries into retirement is interesting, because in retirement, the suicide rate of guys to women is 10 to 1. It goes from 3 to 1 to 10 to 1. Do you know why? Because the women are still social creatures, and they still go out and have coffee and play tennis with their girlfriends when they're retired. And the guys sit there and become grumpy old men and just complain and just die or commit suicide. So the social skills and the ability to talk and change people's opinion, which women are better at than men, as it goes into retirement, that becomes a real positive thing. And not that it's even a negative thing earlier, but they do tend to, I just see from the Facebook postings. The Facebook postings that I read, even the people in drug rehab and addiction, I don't say everybody's trying to get everybody, but, and again, this is, I'm not gonna, don't take this in a bad way, because now I'm kind of doing people rescue, sort of. I'm dealing with people. But for 7 years, I was in a pretty militant cat rescue group, which we took 7,000 cats and kittens out of Verona Street. So I saw in cat rescue the same thing. There was a lot of passion and a lot of backstabbing, a lot of things like, why can't we just do this? No, because she spent $5,000 on, Susie Q's broken leg, and she should only spend $1,000. The kind of thing is here too. It's like, you're helping that one, but you're not helping that one. And now, instead of just letting it go, well, now I want to get you for it. And I see when there's a lot of passion in things, whether it's people or cats, there's this side thing that goes on. Yeah, so legislation and things. Now, I haven't seen too much in the last couple state things. 2015 and 2016, there were at least a dozen laws that were proposed relating to heroin, fentanyl, and other things. And none of them got out. They were all passed by the Senate, and none of them got out of Assembly or Rules Committee. So not a single one went in. Even something so simple as Rich Funky, there was a big bust of Flocka. Remember Flocka? Zombie apocalypse, people chewing on people. It's like a cheap man's meth. There was a whole bunch that was starting to circulate around in like 2012, 2013. And Senator Funky said, this is simple. Let's make that a controlled substance. Right now it's not. And he put in a specific bill just for that drug, never got passed. And if you can't pass something that simple as directed against one drug, how are you going to pass this big broad thing about drug delivery resulting in death, which is now a manslaughter versus criminally negligent homicide? Very hard to get laws passed. 2013, I worked with the county legislature. It was kind of cool on a synthetic drug bill. And I thought, well, the way it's being proposed is too technical and it won't really work. So we spent a lot of time with some of the legislatures from the county. I was given permission to do it, didn't go rogue here, to actually work on a bill that would actually be more effective in these new synthetics when they come on board, and it passed. The problem is counties cannot pass a law which creates a misdemeanor or a felony. It can only be like a violation. That has to go through Albany, and Albany never picked it up. Well, actually, they kind of did pick it up. They had remnants of that law, which they built in when they made K2 spice compounds illegal last year. some of the parts of that law seemed to percolate over. So that was good. Yeah, okay, so getting more beds. So everybody in the rehab recovery community has been calling for more beds for the past 3 years. It's been a big deal since the 2016 DNC article by Patty Singer, Desperate to Detox. It was front page. Desperate to detox. How are we going to get more beds? This is a big umbrella issue, because if you look, you have to drill into it, but here's how it works. Oasis kind of is the organization that funds hundreds of millions of dollars for all this. And they give out the money and they do this. The hospitals are under a system that says you get somebody in, you treat them for a disease, and you kick them out. So the longer they stay in, the more the hospital doesn't make any money. The goal is diagnose the condition, treat them, and get it out. So in a hospital scenario, having someone in for 28 days wastes a lot of resources. They don't want them in the hospital. So what they have to figure out is a way to do the rehab and recovery in a non-hospital situation and beef up those beds. Now I think Helio got another 10 or 15 beds and they're up to 40. So we got 40 inpatient treatment beds right now. We probably need about 100. But what we absolutely need is a direct bridge, I call it a direct bridge, from overdose to a bed. Now, the cool thing about like what Chief has been working on, which is super, super cool, he's working with Open Door Mission and Salvation Army. And you think, what does Open Door Mission and Salvation Army have to do with it? Well, here's a pretty cool thing. If you have somebody that's overdosed and they don't die and they want help, a lot of people don't want help. They wake up and they go, I'm done with you, and they skedoodle. But they want help, and now the parents they got a 14-day wait. They can't get them in someplace. You have to get them someplace that night. You can't let them even wait a week, because they're going to go out and use again. So they just did this. I just did this. It was today. They got somebody who had overdosed, and they took them to two people. One they took to Open Door Mission. One they took to Salvation Army. They stabilized them there for a couple days. In other words, they're already stable. Hospital stabilization means blood pressure and pulse came down. Doesn't mean that they're not jonesing for drugs. So they kept them there, and then they worked with Helio and what's the other big guy there? Helio Health. Yeah. 3 days later, they got him in a 30-day program. But that bridge between the overdose and getting them in a program could be 3 days, could be 2 weeks. You have to capture that person, physically capture that person that wants help and put them someplace so that they don't go back out and use. And I think the two things that Chief Van Brederode found, which is cool, is Open Door Mission and Salvation Army. Salvation Army's been there forever and a day. They're like this golden nugget of beds that we don't even talk to. So that's cool.
Where is that located?
It's way down on West Avenue, down off of Main Street. Main splits into West and I think Chili, and you go down West Ave. We used it when I was in the hospital in the 80s. It was called Entry to Care. Now, before there was the opiate crisis, there was everybody drunk crisis. And I worked at St. Mary's, and a Saturday night at St. Mary's was a lot of people that were drunk. A lot of street people that drank a lot of alcohol. And they would stabilize them, in other words, get them below 0.1, because sometimes they were 0.3, 0.4. Get them, let's sleep through the night, put them in the van, and drive them to Salvation Army. And so these people then would have a hot shower, they would have food, and they'd have about 3 or 4 days of just kind of maybe a little bit of a reset, and maybe they would go back on the street. But that was how it was done in the 80s. It was called Entry to Care. The van would show up, and they would put them in it, and they'd drive them over there. And that saved people probably from dying. And I thought that the fact that they're still open and they have beds, I think that's a fantastic asset. Because people talk to all the other ones. They'll talk to Strong Recovery, and they'll talk to Helio, and that's all good stuff too. You talk to Delphi and Huther Doyle for evaluations and stuff, and that's all good too. But these plug-ins, what I call a plug-in, you need to plug that person in from the emergency room into like a bridge, into something for a few days, so that. And we have parents crying saying, "I did not know my kid was on this stuff." And this is the first time they overdosed, and that was the first time I knew they were on it.
Right.
And now I expected him to stay in the emergency room for a few days while I figured out what to do. And all of a sudden, here comes, I call it the tuna and Medicab to go, because it's true. They stabilize him for 6-7 hours, they put him in a cab with a tuna fish sandwich, and they send him home. And here they are in the driveway. And that is really not adequate a way of handling with it. So I run into, I'm going to say, 2 types of people in active addiction. The people that come in, and we had somebody just the other day walked in, and she was really, I don't hate to use bad terms like strung out or whatever, but she was really in active addiction. And she just said, I'm done with this. Please help me. Those are some people. Those are the people that you really want to get help, because the success rate of them maybe staying in, even an inpatient for a while, is pretty good. You have an entire other bunch of people in active addiction who are in what I call denial. Now, they're not in denial of the addiction. They want you to be in denial of the addiction. And this is a fascinating group of them. I mean, it's fascinating, not in a bad way or sarcastic. What's fascinating is how well they are to keep their girlfriends, boyfriends, jobs, parents, and all this stuff just rolling along. And they're using pills or heroin or heroin coke or Xanax on top of the whole thing for a long period of time until all of a sudden they fall off the edge. So, and then the parents realize it. That's the group that's the hardest to penetrate, because if you've ever dealt with someone in that group and you're a suspicious person, and after working in the crime lab 24 years taught me to be a little suspicious of people, you know, the Ron Reagan trust but verify. If you try to call them out, whoa, all hell breaks loose. Because not only do they absolutely scream, yell, and who knows what they're going to do, if you're a parent and you call out that kid, be aware that it could result in the kid hanging himself in the backyard. It's that bad when you say to someone, wait a minute, I caught you. I just found a bunch of stuff behind the toilet. Now you're going to go into rehab on Monday. I'm not putting up with that. That happened to a friend of mine with marijuana, and the kid hung himself. Because it's like, not doing it. Just, I'm done. And the parent says, it's marijuana. You need to go into rehab, which I don't know if you rehab marijuana, but it's like, so the fright of, can I find out if they're using is one thing. The accusation of the use in someone who doesn't want help, more times than not, is not going to result, oh, wow, I'm glad you found this out. That's not the response. And now, what Pandora's box have you opened? So that's the part that needs more work and more of sitting around and brainstorming and coming up with ideas. Well, they don't want to be found out because the system is working pretty good for them. I mean, they've been able to keep their job. I mean, in some cases, they're going to lose their job. In some cases, they're going to lose their wife or husband. You know, there's going to be custody. There's going to be divorce. And it could be alcohol, too. I mean, I've known people that were functional alcoholics for, you know, years. And it wasn't until that tipping point, I call it the tipping point, where it starts to fall apart. And then they're getting in accidents or DWIs, or they're just a mess, and you go, But by then, that's way, way later than you should be able to figure it out.